Hi everybody, how are we doing? Thanks for joining me on another Saturday morning for another round of stories. I've got 5 stories for you today. The reason I've got 5, the upload is about the same time as it normally is, but the reason I have 5 is because 1 or 2 of them are quite short. Okay, before I get into the stories again this week, I'd just like to mention something. I sometimes get messages from people saying, oh, I've heard this story before. Now, what's happening now, I've been telling these stories for almost 5 years, believe it or not. The time's flown by. And I must have read hundreds and hundreds of these stories that have all been sent in to me. And I really do appreciate the guys who've sent the emails. But I do run short some weeks. So I've got 2 choices. I can either cut back the Saturday stories to once every fortnight. 3 choices, actually. Or I can make the upload shorter. Maybe there's a bunch of newer channels that have popped up who tell stories I've noticed recently, and some of them, they'll tell the stories for like 10-15 minutes. Well, I don't want to do that. I've always made my uploads about 30 minutes to 35 minutes long, and I know people like to listen to the uploads that I put out when they're out with the dog or working on the car, whatever, and I don't want to cut down the time, and I also don't want to change the uploads from every week to every other week. So what I've done is I've dug out some of the older stories from 4 or 5 years ago, and I've reread them. Not the whole upload. I do constantly get new stories, but occasionally I do run a little bit low some weeks. So what I do is I go back and find some of the better stories, and I might tag them onto the end just to extend the upload. So if you're one of those guys who feel like writing in and saying, oh, I've heard this before, it really isn't, there's no need for it really. Just if you don't want to hear it again, just move on. And it might well be that you heard it on another channel, because the other thing I found as well is in the early days, I don't know any other person other than Simon Lander Smiles who used to tell stories. Now there must be, I've lost count, there must be a lot of people doing this. So you might have heard the story on another channel, not here. But as I say, if you think you've heard a story before and you're not interested in listening again, then it's better to just maybe wait until next week till I get a bunch of new stories again. And, as I say, new stories are coming in all the time, so I'm sure there'll be plenty more in the future. And if you're one of those guys who is sitting on a story, please send it in, and I'll change all the names as always, make it anonymous, and you can hear your story read out right here on Thailand Bound. All right? Okay, let's get into story 1 of 5 today.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I am not very confident in myself, nor am I outgoing, and the first 3 nights I was there, I didn't get involved with any women, but on the 4th night, I went to Soy 6. When I first arrived in Pattaya, I had been refusing to follow any of the girls when they approached me, but then decided on the 4th day to just go with it. So I was approached by a bar girl not long after I entered Soy 6 and decided to go into her bar. I was then approached by the Mama-san, who was around 40 years old, the same age as me. I decided to buy her and the other woman who dragged me into the bar some drinks. This bar had a closed-off aircon section, which was ideal for me. Before I knew it, she is on top of me, kissing me. After about an hour, I decided to bar find her. She took me to a few bars, and I bought her more drinks, and we eventually went back to my hotel. We enjoyed a lot of aerobics throughout the night. In the morning, we went for breakfast, and we decided that we were going to meet again that night, and that I would come to her bar to see her at 6 p.m. I got to her bar about 20 minutes before planned, and she was nowhere to be seen. After a few minutes, I see a customer walk downstairs, and then she followed not long after. I bar find her after a drink or 2, but it wasn't the same. She kept denying anything had happened upstairs. We both knew what each other were thinking. I knew she had been with a customer, which didn't bother me, as I knew what these bar girls were all about. But she wasn't the same and started arguing with me even after I bar find her. She knew that I knew she had just been with a customer. I was honest and said what I thought, but she wouldn't accept it. Long story short, after her crying and screaming at me, she eventually told me the truth, and we eventually parted ways because of her behaviour. The following night, I was sitting at a bar in Treetown with a girl, and she shows up at the same bar with a friend. I told her about the bar near my hotel that I liked from the night before, which gave me an excuse to leave. I paid my bill and left. I then get text messages from her saying that she was going to find and hurt the girl I was with. I could not believe what I was reading. I replied in the most respectful manner over and over, but the texts kept coming. to the point I ended up blocking her. I then get text messages from two other numbers saying the same thing, that she was going to ruin my holiday and that she was going to find the girls I was with. After I had blocked these numbers, I get an email. I still, to this day, have absolutely no idea how she got my email address. It was an old email address I don't use anymore. How she got this, I will never know. This worried me a little. I didn't go to Soi 6 for the rest of my holiday and found a nice girl who worked in a bar close to my hotel, who I still speak with today. She has not once asked me for money, which I was kind of expecting, and will no doubt spend more time when I go back to Pattaya. It kind of shows how crazy and emotional some of these girls are. Maybe I gave her more expectation, who knows? When in Pattaya, don't give girls false promises, it can become messy. And there you go. So a lot of guys have said to me in the past, like, they don't understand that, these girls work in bars and they're going off with different customers every night. But yet when the guy does it, they get really hot-headed, like it's almost the boyfriend, it's almost like a boyfriend two-timing. And I think it just boils down to one thing, and that's money. Basically, she's trying to protect her investment, because if you're still there and you go off with another girl, it means you're not going to go with her, does it? So she's going to lose money. And basically, that's what I think it is. It's just trying to protect her investment. Right, okay, let's jump straight into story number 2, because we've got 4 more to go. Back in 2010, I went on my honeymoon for a 3-week holiday and experienced 3 events that taught me valuable lessons. The first event happened in Phuket with another father and son at the beach. We rented jet skis from an owner who charged the standard rate and recommended we hand over our valuables for safekeeping. While he had my wallet, phone and sunglasses, all worth under $100, I had his jet ski, which was much more valuable. However, the father and son were skeptical, worrying that the owner might run off with our items. During our 30-minute ride, an unexpected tide caused both jet skis to flip over. I managed to get back on mine, but the father and son panicked, as their phone and wallet had fallen into the water when they capsized. Despite our efforts, we couldn't find them, and I'm sure they're at the bottom of the sea to this day. The lesson here is clear. Avoid taking valuables when you go on a jet ski. If you do, it's better to leave them with someone on shore. The second event took place on Koh Samui, where I decided to rent a motorcycle despite knowing the risks and having never ridden one before. It was something I wanted to try in my 20s. The bike shop gave me what looked like a brand new motorcycle, which meant any scratch would be obvious. Everything was fine until about 30 minutes in, when my wife and I got lost. I stopped to ask for directions, and while waiting, my wife got off the bike, tripped, and it fell on the gravel, scratching it quite a bit. I knew we were in trouble. Luckily, a mechanic was next door. He didn't speak English but could see how upset I was. He started fixing the bike using a large knife to scrape off the top layer of the paint, which made it look even worse initially. But then he smoothed it out and applied some finishes, making it look much better, though not perfect. I waited until dusk to return, and because the light was fading, the rental staff didn't notice the scratches, and I got my bond back. However, I never went back to that part of Koh Samui since. The moral of this story is clear. Don't rent a bike if you're not experienced. But if you do run into trouble, a local mechanic might just save the day. The final story was when my wife had to go home 48 hours before me, leaving me alone on Koh San Road the night before my flight. I hung out on the street, checked my social media and email at an internet cafe, and then went out for a big night of drinking. It all seemed fine until I arrived at the airport and saw the shocked faces of my wife and parents. My wife asked, "How could you?" It took a few minutes to figure out what had happened. I had forgotten to log out of my Facebook account at the internet cafe, and someone had posted, "I'm so happy to announce we are expecting." With me in the air, unable to clarify, it seemed every friend and relative called my family to congratulate them. It was very embarrassing, and honestly, I don't miss internet cafes at all. Despite these adventures, I'd love my trip to Thailand and still feel the allure of this beautiful country. I hope your readers can learn from these stories from my day trips years ago. Okay, so that should have read from my trips years ago, not day trips. You wouldn't go to Thailand on a day trip, would you? So a couple of comments. Firstly, on the jet skis, I wouldn't have done either. When I go to the beach, I take minimal. I leave my wallet, passport, everything in the safe. And actually, I don't take the passport now because I have a Thai driving license. That's accepted as ID in the hotels. I'll just take the minimal amount of money that I need. And the thing about the phone, what they sell in Thailand, especially around the beach areas, you can get these waterproof plastic packs, things that you hang on your neck. You can put your phone in it and they're absolutely waterproof. So if you did actually drop the phone in the sea, it would be fine as long as you didn't let it go to the bottom, as it were. On the motorcycle story, what I would say about that is, yeah, he's right. You know, don't if you get some experience before you start renting motorcycles. But what I would advise you to do also is, before you take the motorcycle, go around with a video, with your camera, your phone camera, and do a video of the whole outside of the bike. Some of the bikes are quite older, lots of scratches on them from previous renters, and just go around, video the bike, and especially home in on any big scratches or chips, dents, that sort of thing, and just show it to the owner of the motorcycle rental shop and just have them agree that this is the condition of the bike. Then when you come back, they can't turn around and say, oh, you've done a scratch, or this dent wasn't here when you rented it, and try and get some money out of you. Normally they're pretty good these days, the people who rent out motorcycles. They used to be very bad 25 years ago. A lot of them, they were real crooks. But these days, most of the Thais who rent out motorcycles, they seem to be pretty honest, in my experience. I still rent bikes when I go to Pattaya or Hua Hin, somewhere like that. Right, let's get into story number 3. As an entertainment executive at a major US studio, I often find myself jet-setting across Asia. Meeting girls has never been an issue for me, whether it's for a short fling or longer relationship. I've always managed to avoid the famous walking streets, ping pong shows and the ladyboys, and have never bar-fined anyone. I've been a fan of your channel for a few years now, finding it highly entertaining. However, I must admit, I used to think the men who send in these stories or pay for companionship were a bit pathetic. I figured they flocked to Thailand because it was cheap, not because they were captivated by the culture. But a recent incident made me rethink my stance on the transactional nature of most female relationships I see. On a recent business trip to Bangkok, I decided to unwind with a nightcap at the 5-star hotel bar. The place was half empty, but a band was playing and the female singer caught my eye. She had a stunning voice and equally stunning presence, so naturally I sent her a drink. During her break, she came over and stuck up a conversation. I learned that her mum was Thai, her dad was in the US military, she grew up in Texas. She had travelled the world and even had a graduate degree from a well-known US university. It felt like a scene straight out of a movie, the exotic talented singer and the charming worldly executive connecting in a foreign land. As we chatted, I was thoroughly impressed by her intelligence, charm and adventurous spirit. She shared stories of her travels, her passion for music and her aspirations. I thought to myself, wow, this is the kind of woman you meet once in a lifetime. We ended up spending the night together and it felt like a genuine connection, not just a fleeting encounter. The next morning over breakfast, she dropped a bombshell. Her wallet had been stolen and she lost about $1,000 in cash from her band's earnings. Being the generous soul that I am, and possibly still riding high from our romantic night, I told her we would go to a bank and would help her out. After breakfast and a romantic stroll holding hands, I got the cash from an ATM and handed it to her. Feeling a connection, I asked her if she'd like to have dinner that evening. She politely declined, citing other plans. Undeterred, I followed up a couple of times thinking we had a genuine connection, but to my surprise, she ended up ignoring me and then blocking me. Bizarre, right? I was left scratching my head, wondering what went wrong. A quick online search revealed that this is a common scam targeting foreigners. Apparently, the beautiful singer with a stolen wallet routine is a classic move. Who knew? This experience gave me a newfound sympathy for the men who frequent your channel. I realised that many male-female relationships, especially those with traditional elements like the man paying for things, are fundamentally transactional. So now I have a lot more grace for folks who must barfine to meet their relationship needs. In conclusion, I've come to understand that wherever you're an entertainment executive or just a regular guy, the world of romance can be a tricky transactional place. It doesn't matter how successful, charming, or experienced you are, anyone can fall for a well executed scam. So here's to all the men out there navigating these waters. May your wallets remain intact and your hearts unbroken. If nothing else, I've learned to approach relationships with a bit more caution and a lot more humour. After all, life's too short to take everything seriously, even when you're an entertainment industry executive getting swindled by a beautiful singer in Bangkok. So a couple of things on this story. A lot of the guys I know who go to Pattaya, they don't go to Pattaya to look for love. They're not looking for girlfriends. They're not looking for wives. What they're looking for is short-time transactional relationships, and that's the only reason they go there. As far as the guys who do actually fall for girls, I do get quite a lot of messages, very judgmental emails, and I think it's mainly from people who've never been to Thailand. Like, how could the guy fall in love with a girl who works in a bar? And a lot of people don't understand that a guy doesn't go into a bar with the intention of, I want to meet a wife, somebody could potentially I could live with. That's not the scenario most of the time. What happens is a guy will go into a bar, and I've seen this many times. A guy will go into the bar and he'll hook up with a girl, have a few drinks, go back to the hotel for some aerobics, and he kind of likes her, and he thinks to himself, well, I'm here for 2 weeks, I don't want to keep changing girls, I'll just keep bar finding this girl every day. And eventually there's a connection, and the guy actually falls for the girl, and it's not intentional, but it's the human factor, isn't it? When you're with somebody every day, these things can happen. And then you get judgmental people who say, oh, the guy's a simp, the guy's stupid, how could he fall for these girls? But it does happen, and I've seen some very intelligent people who own their own businesses, maybe speak a couple of languages, and it's happened to them. And they're not simps at all. It's just something that happens from time to time. I'm not a white knight. I'm not kind of sticking up for everybody. I'm just saying, unless you've been in that situation, it is very difficult to understand. Right, let's jump into story number 4. Hi Peter, I'm David, a 42-year-old man from a town near Mansfield in the East Midlands. I would firstly like to say how much me and my friend Joe like listening to all of your viewers' stories. My story is a rather long one, as I've been going to Thailand since November 2009, and back then I was only 30. It was the time of the financial crisis, and as I'm a self-employed plasterer there wasn't a lot of work around due to the housing market slowing down, with the banks not lending much money for mortgages at this time. I was working in Mansfield at the time in a factory. I had recently broken up from a long-term relationship in 2007, feeling a little insecure and very bored with this factory job I had. A few of my newfound work friends at the factory were also wanting a little more from life other than making fire doors for a living in boring Mansfield. We all regularly chatted about getting a work visa for another country and leaving this dull factory life behind. All 4 of us decided we wanted to go to Australia and work, so we applied for a working holiday visa and we all got accepted. I was very excited about the whole new experience I was going to have. I started doing some research about having a holiday stop on the way. One of the guys had already been to Thailand before, but not for a long period, and had told me a few stories about the kingdom. Our departure date of November the 9th, 2009 had finally arrived. We flew Thai Airways. 3 of us had never flown long haul before, so we made the most of it with the free drinks and food on board. We met a guy on the aircraft going to Thailand, but with a lot more experience than us. He told us lots of stories about Thailand, the bars, the girls, and how to treat the Thai people respectfully. We arrived in Bangkok and made our way to our hotel, which was located near to Khao Son Road. I don't think anyone will ever forget that first feeling of walking out of the heavily air-conditioned airport in Bangkok and into an almost furnace of heat, humidity and pollution. Still, we had arrived in Bangkok. Like any other newbies, we made some mistakes. Firstly, being talked into booking an expensive airport limo, live and learn. After reaching the hotel, we get showered, changed and head off to this famous Khao Son Road. The feeling was like no other, the sounds and the smells of the street food. Even though one of the group had been to Thailand before, as I mentioned earlier in the story, we fell for the old tuk-tuk scam to the ping pong shows. That was mistake number two. I've heard many nightmare stories about these venues, people getting ripped off for thousands of baht, but we had a great time and never got bothered once while we were there. Our first 3 days in Bangkok were really good, both the daytime and of course the nights, where we went out partying. In the day, we went out visiting the temples and doing all the touristy things you do in a new city. On our last night in Bangkok, we decided to go for a nice meal in a restaurant near our hotel. We sat down for dinner where we were met by a beautiful Thai serving girl who looked no older than 18 but was actually 27. We continued to enjoy our evening with lots of food and lots of Chang beer. All four of us were flirting with a Thai girl that worked there and asked her to join us for the night when she had finished work. She accepted and we hit Khao San Road for the third and final night in Bangkok. It was a usual crazy night with lots of Chang beer and lots of Thai food. The night finally came to an end and I found myself with this beautiful Thai girl in some random hotel lobby drinking beer while she was eating Thai food. We ended up getting a room in this hotel as I was sharing a room back at my hotel and wanted some privacy for the upcoming gymnastics. We had a great evening and she never asked me for anything, which I thought was great. If this is Thailand, I can live with it. Not spending too much money was not to last forever, however. Many thousands of baht have exchanged hands since then. I guess I got lucky, and being much younger than today, I probably looked a bit more appealing to the girls than I do currently. We left for Koh Samui the following afternoon, but before we left, I popped into the restaurant and exchanged Facebook contact details with my new girlfriend from last night. We visited Koh Samui, Phuket and Phi Phi Islands. We joined in all the full moon and half moon parties. It was great fun back then. I wouldn't dream of doing that now, but being 11 years ago, it was all fun to me. After 4 weeks of what had been the absolute best time of my life, meeting and making friends with lots of people and some who I still keep in contact with today, it was time to fly on to Australia. We landed in Sydney and I was feeling very sad at leaving Thailand. There I was in an amazing city like Sydney and all I wanted to do is get back on a flight straight back to Bangkok. Nonetheless, I went with the flow of the group and continued to enjoy my time in Australia. We spent 3 weeks in Sydney enjoying Christmas and New Year on Darling Harbour. We then rented a camper van and drove to Melbourne, driving along the coast, stopping off at a number of places to spend the night. We all enjoyed the beautiful southeast coastline of Australia. My funds were getting very low at this point, and as I arrived in Melbourne and after paying for a week's rent in a hospital, my funds had finally run out. I went to an internet cafe across the road as smartphones weren't really around that much back then. I searched online for a job and luckily started work the next morning. The job scene was much better back then. I was enjoying my time in Australia, but I could not get Thailand out of my mind. I just wanted to be back there. The Australian girls are stunning, but I'm not the most handsome man on the planet, so I never really stood a chance of getting together with a beautiful Australian girl. Around this time, most of our group of guys from Nottingham had agreed to split up and go their separate ways. After a few months of installing loft installations in Melbourne and earning a very good salary, I had managed to save a little money and was planning another camping trip up to Darwin. It was a huge shock to the system coming from Thailand, where £20 can go a long way if you're careful, compared to Australia where it is very expensive for everything. Me and another guy headed up to Darwin again, stopping off and camping along the way. We had another amazing time experiencing the Australian outback with all its wildlife, totally different to England, and all the time never forgetting about Thailand and constantly talking about Bangkok at every opportunity that I could. Again, I was getting very low on funds, so I started looking for another job. Someone mentioned a couple of pearl boat companies in Darwin, but had said you don't stand much chance of getting a job with them, as every backpacker in town is after the same job. Nonetheless, me and one of the other guys tried our luck and headed off to the office of the pearl boat company. We walked in and the guy at the desk asked what we wanted. A job, we replied. It was then that the phone rang and the guy at the desk answered. He continued to have a conversation with a man on the other end of the phone, and just before he hung up, he asked if they were going to replace the two backpackers that had recently been sacked for stealing pearls. He put the phone down and said, "This is your lucky day, boys. When can you start?" This job was just what I was looking for. 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and on my 3 weeks off, I was going to fly back to Thailand. This job wasn't just ideal for me to get back to Thailand, it was one of the best experiences of my life. Working in the Northern Territory on a boat in shark-infested waters, the wildlife was unbelievable. So the first break I got, I sailed back to Darwin and booked the first flight to Phuket via Singapore. I had to spend the night in Singapore, which I didn't mind at all, as it's a beautiful city with also lots of fun things to do. Whilst working on the boat, I made friends with a cool German guy named Marcel. I introduced him to Thailand for the first time, and we returned on every break we had. After a year of being away, I returned to the UK. I started back at work in the UK and saved up to go back and travel some more. I was always interested in going back to tour Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia, so after a few months saving up, I flew back to Bangkok and had some more trips planned in Southeast Asia. Vietnam and Laos were great fun, but I couldn't wait to get back to Thailand. The Thai girl I told you about earlier in the story, who we had met in the restaurant, had now moved to Phuket and opened her own little travel shop. You know the type that you see all over Thailand for booking your trips to the islands. Bus, boat and train tickets and so on. We had kept in touch all this time on Messenger, and she offered me a job working in her travel shop. I was interested in staying in Thailand for a longer period of time and thought this could be a good opportunity to do that. I made my way to Phuket by bus, as I was again getting a little low on funds. After finding an apartment and paying a month's rent near the travel shop, I was literally broke. I wasn't really worried about this, as I was making a little bit of money at the travel shop, just enough to eat and drink. It wasn't about partying at this point, it was about just staying in Thailand and living the Thai lifestyle. I was probably the poorest phalang in Thailand at this point, but I didn't care. It was just great to be there and wake up every morning in the country I love so much. I was also waiting for a tax return that would be processed for my time working in Australia, so I knew eventually I would receive around £1,500 transferred to my UK bank account. I was living on around 200 to 300 baht per day, but having the best time of my life. I didn't really enjoy working in the travel shop, as the Thai girl I was working for didn't really have the same happy-go-lucky attitude she had when we first met in Bangkok. In fact, she turned out to be a real misery and wasn't pleasant to work for at all. After finishing work one day, I decided to have a walk down Bangla Road and see if I could find some kind of another job. Most of the bar owners laughed at me when I asked them for work, but I continued to try. I decided to turn up a soy off Bangla Road called Soy Sea Dragon. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know the street. I walked slowly up the soy, just looking for a friendly-faced bar owner to approach, when I came to a bar called Honey Bar. The bar was covered with balloons, food laid out as it was one of the bar girls' birthdays. The owner of the bar invited me to sit down and eat, so I did and ordered a drink. The owner come and sat with me and asked all the usual questions: what is my name and what I had planned for the night. I replied, I'm looking for a job. Looking at me a little confused, a job? But you're a phalang. Why you want job? After explaining my situation to her, she said, you're serious, aren't you? I tried to help you, wait 1 minute. I carried on drinking my beer, not expecting anything spectacular to develop, when the lady returned with an Asian guy. I first thought he was Thai, but after speaking with him, he told me he was Malaysian and he owned 4 go-go bars in Soy Sea Dragon and was looking for an English-speaking manager. I told him I would be interested, so began to follow him inside one of his go-go bars. We walked inside, and as you would expect, around 20 scantily clad girls were dancing on stage. I thought all my Christmases had come at once. He showed me around a little and said, you can start tonight if you like. I worked there for around 3 months all in all, and it was an awesome experience. I was still very new to Thailand at this point, but this job taught me a lot about what goes on with the girls and how they have numerous phalangs sending them cash. I literally witnessed every scenario with these girls in the time I spent there, but I had lots of fun and all the girls made me feel very welcome. I still keep in touch with a couple of them to this day. My salary was laughable, if I'm honest, just 9,000 baht a month, but I wasn't there for the money, it was all about the experience. As soon as the tax rebate I spoke of earlier in the story was debited into my account, I finished the job and I enjoyed around 3 weeks holiday, and of course I went on to spend time with my favourite girl I had been watching for the last 3 months but had been off limits to me as I was working in the go-go bar. Since 2009 and my first time leaving Europe, I have been all around the world and would say travel is by far my biggest passion. I have plans to go many more countries and want to experience many more adventures, but Thailand will always be my place to go. After all the countries I have visited, Thailand is by far my favourite country. No disrespect to any other country, but Thailand is just something else. I also introduced Thailand to my father at 60 years old, and let's just say, after endless amounts of advice before his first trip, he made every rookie mistake in the book. But that's another story. Thank you so much, and I will continue to watch your channel every week. Hopefully, we will meet someday in Thailand and enjoy a beer when we can all get back there. Well, that's a story I first read out on this channel about 4 years ago, and sad to say, I've never had any further contact from the guy. I don't know if he's returned to Thailand since sending me in this story. Maybe he didn't like the way I read it out the first time, who knows. But you'll find this with a lot of people who travel around South Asia. I've got a friend, he's a viewer actually, who's become a friend, and he'd never been out to Southeast Asia before, and he'd booked a week in Cambodia and a week directly into Pattaya. He didn't want to come to Bangkok, flew straight into Suvarnabhumi and took the bus down to Pattaya. And I was actually in Pattaya at the time, and I met him and I said to him, how did you get on in Cambodia? And he says, you know what, Peter, I wasted my time. I should have come straight to Pattaya. It's great here. You know, next time I book for 2 weeks, it'll be straight into Thailand, not Cambodia or Vietnam, anywhere like that. Okay, right, I'm going to read the fifth and final story out. This is somewhat shorter. Hopefully you'll enjoy this one just as much as the last one. This is a story of one of the many nights I've spent in Pattaya over the last 15 years. It begins like any other night in Pattaya, bar hopping and out on the prowl in the hope of finding some female company. It ends, however, with no sordid accounts, but instead one of the many experiences that have shaped my understanding of Thailand and its people. On this night, I found myself in one of the more friendlier establishments on Walking Street. As soon as I sat down, one of the lovelies on stage caught my eye. They were all lovely to be fair, but I had a particular type which this girl happened to fulfill. A pretty girl by any account, she strutted her stuff as they do in these places. I did notice, however, that compared to all the screaming and tomfoolery going on around me, she did seem a little glum. I was already taken by her at this point, so I called her over to my table. I did my best to win her over while she sipped on her lady's drink, but again something seemed off. Finally, she leaned over to my ear and confessed that she's not feeling well and won't be able to join me tonight, though disappointed. I also knew that other options were just down the road. I smiled and simply spent the rest of my time in the bar, genuinely having a friendly chat with this girl. I naively asked her why she didn't just call in sick because she was unwell. She explained that being a weekend, no leave was allowed. The only way out it was if she was bar fined by a customer. Of course, I knew what was coming. She asked if I could bar fine her so she could go home. I was about ready to make my excuses and move on when she further explained that she could afford to pay for half and swore she would pay me back the rest somehow. I stared into her eyes, put my hand on her head and realised she indeed had a fever. I knew I was not getting my money back. I called the mama-san to make the arrangements. The girl discreetly stuffed a ball of cash into my hands and went off to get her things. It was about 400 baht in crumpled notes, her takings for the night, I suppose. I paid the full bar fine and our drinks and was soon walking out to Second Road. Along the way, she kept thanking me profusely, while tightly holding my hand. We reached Second Road and I asked her, what will you do now? I call my brother, come take me home. Okay then. Your money, I pay you back. How long you stay Thailand? No, it's okay, I have to go. No, wait, I take care of you. I come your hotel now, okay? No, really, it's okay. Go home and get well. After an awkward pause, this lovely girl started tearing up, got down on her knees and bowed to me in the Thai fashion for all of the Second Row to see. It took all my strength to hold in my own tears as I quickly picked her up, hugged her. We waited till her brother arrived and said our goodbyes. I never saw her again and wondered at first if I'd been had, but I soon concluded for myself that it didn't matter. I did what I could given the situation with a few hundred baht less, but with another story to tell of the land and the people we've come to love. They do have a kind of, most of the Thai bar girls, they do have a kind side to them. You know, people give them a kind of a rough break, really. You know, they always kind of run them down and say bad things about them. But don't forget, I mean, I haven't got a bleeding heart. I'm not a white knight. But, you know, you have to remember at the end of the day, they come from very, very poor regions in Thailand, especially the north of Thailand, the Isan area. You know, and sometimes they have to pay back other people's debts. You know, maybe they had a husband who was gambling and she's now got to pay the debt. You know, they don't get paid very much money in a factory. I think it's about 300 baht a day. It's a pittance, really. Your average waitress in Bangkok will earn anywhere between 9,000 and 11,000 baht. So if the girl's in trouble or she's got to take care of another family member's debt or something similar, then unfortunately they're forced to come down to somewhere like Pattaya and work. But a lot of them, they do have a kind side to them. I remember years ago, I had a friend who was half cocked. You know, he'd had quite a lot to drink, and he was with a bar girl. She got into the BART bus on the on the beach road. They were going back to his hotel. He had one foot on the step to get onto the BART bus, and the BART bus pulled away, and he actually fell off because he was drunk and rolled along the road, and he got quite badly, not seriously injured, but he had quite a lot of scratches, and you know, a little scratch can produce a lot of blood, right? And this girl that was with him, she was very, very kind to him. You know, she picked him up, she ensured that he went to the Bangkok hospital, took him to the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she stayed with him for an hour or so while he was patched up, went back to his hotel, and she didn't demand anything. She didn't want any compensation for that. She was just, you know, she just wanted to make sure the guy was okay. So they do have a kind side to them, and you will find that with a lot of the girls that you meet in a place like Pattaya, okay? Right, that's it from me. Enough waffling as always. Don't forget, guys, any stories, please send them in. I'm always running short. I'll make them totally anonymous, and you too can hear your story read out right here on Thailand Bound. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Saturday with some more stories.